Coming back to what we know from the Babylonian Chronicle, in the months of Tishrei in Hebrew, October 616 BCE, Egyptian and Assyrian forces headed down the Euphrates and attacked the city of Gablinu, but after failing, they withdrew. The Babylonian Chronicle contains no evidence of a continued Egyptian presence in the region, and the next time that Egypt assisted Assyria was 6 years later. It seemed that during this period Egypt made efforts to continue to establish its reign over the regions west of the Euphrates without sending forces beyond it. The collapse of Assyria in the following years was rapid. In the months of Adaru, of the 10th year of Nebuchadnezzar's rule, which is around March 615 BCE, the Babylonian forces managed to press the Assyrian army at the Tigris, pushing them to beyond the province of Arabha up to the lower Zab, causing many casualties and taking much plunder. At this stage, a real threat had already been leveled against the city of Assyria, and it is no wonder that only 2 months after the first campaign, in the months of Ayaru of the 11th year of Nebuchadnezzar's rule, around May 615 BCE, he gathered his army and set out against the ancient Assyrian capital. Approximately 1 month later, during the months of Simanu, Sivan in Hebrew, June 615 BCE, when it became clear that the city would be able to hold out and that the forces of Sinshar Ishkun were due to arrive there, the Babylonian army retreated down the Tigris toward the city of Takrit. The Assyrians pursued the retreating Babylonian army and for 10 days laid siege to the city of Takrit. The Babylonian Chronicle contains victory for the besieged Babylonian force, and it seemed that after the failure of the Assyrians, they reversed direction and returned home. Approximately half a year later, in the early winter of 615 BCE, the army of the Medes entered the province of Arabha. However, the Babylonian Chronicle is fragmented at this point, and the relationship between the presence of the Medes in the region and the Babylonian presence there at the beginning of that same year is not clear. In any event, it is reasonable to assume that the Medes conquered the region as preparation for the campaign of the Assyrian city of Nineveh in the summer of the following year. In the months of Ab in Hebrew, of the 12th year of Nebuchadnezzar's rule, around July or August 614 BCE, the Medes left Arabha, attacked Kalchu, which is the city of Nimrud, and Nineveh, and continued rapidly further northward to capture the nearby city of Tarbitzu. Afterwards, they went back down the Tigris and laid siege to the city of Ashur. The Babylonian army came to the aid of the Medes only after the Medes had begun to decisive offensive against the city, capturing it, killing many of its residents, and taking many others as captives. In my opinion, it is possible to assume that the intention of this description in the Chronicles was to stress that the Babylonians had no part in the cruel conquest of the city. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, and Umakishtar, king of the Medes, met near the ruins of the devastated city and signed an anti-Assyrian treaty which was to deal the final death blow to Assyria within a few years. Nevertheless, the Assyrians didn't concede defeat, and their last attempt to resist Babylon took place in the 13th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. In the region of Suhu, in the Middle Euphrates, which Babylon captured already in 616 BCE, a revolt began in the months of Ayaru, May or June 613 BCE. Nebuchadnezzar hastened to suppress the revolt, captured the city of Rachilu, and laid siege to the city of Anatu. At the height of the siege, the Assyrian army, headed by Sinshar Ishkun, drew near, which led to the retreat of the Babylonian army, probably because the Babylonian army was not prepared for face-to-face combat against the Assyrians. Such a battle was no longer required because in the beginning of the 14th year of his reign, around spring 612 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar and his army headed toward the Tigris. There he met Umakishtar and his army, and together the two kings proceeded toward Nineveh. They laid siege on the city in the month of Simanu, June 612 BCE, continuing through the months of Abu, August 612 BCE, when the walls of the Assyrian city were breached and it was conquered and brutally destroyed. The Babylonian Chronicle contains references to the fate of Sinchar Ishkun, but this segment of the Chronicle is broken and unclear. The battle ended on the 20th of Ululu, around September 14th or 15th in the year 612 BCE, when Umakishtar returned to his country. Nebuchadnezzar sent his army to the northwest in order to get some more plunder and captives. But meanwhile, the last Assyrian king, Ashur-uballit II, ascended the throne in Haran, and although he surely demanded possession of all the territories of the kingdom, at this stage Assyria had, in fact, ceased to exist. In the months of Du'uzi, Hebrew Tammuz, of the 15th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, around June-July 611 BCE, the king of Babylon and his army headed for the upper Euphrates and the Balich River, where he established his rule up to the border of Haran. Thus, the Babylonians prepared the ground for a campaign against Haran, and this campaign, joined by the Medes, was held in the early winter of 610 BCE, after a 5-month period in which Nebuchadnezzar spent with his army in Assyria to ensure the stability of his rule there. The Medes Babylonian army threatened Ashur-uballit II and the Egyptian army that came to its assistance. The Babylonians laid siege to Haran, and during the winter of 610 BCE and the beginning of 609, the last Assyrian center capitulated. In the months of Adaru, around March 609 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar was able to return to Babylon, leaving a garrison in Haran and in other cities along the Balich and the Euphrates. The Egyptian presence in Haran that year is worthy of some attention because after Ashur-uballit established there his alternative capital, Egypt found it easier to help him to confront the attacks of Medes Babylonian army. Furthermore, Assyria's end already seems real and concrete, so that if Egypt wished to avoid direct engagement with the forces rising from the east, it had to try to provide Assyria with necessary assistance. At the same time, it seemed that the main reason for the Egyptian presence across the Euphrates, on the banks of the Balich, was to rise to power of Necho II after the death of his father, Psametichus I, in late July or August of 610 BCE. The conclusion is that only several months after taking the throne, Necho II initiated a campaign to aid Assyria, evidence of the cardinal importance he assigned to the last remaining chance to preserve their power base east of the Euphrates. This may also help explain the battle that took place only 3 months after the establishment of Babylonian rule in Haran around March 609 BCE. According to the account of the Babylonian Chronicle, Ashur-uballit, supported by a large Egyptian army, attacked Haran in the month of Tammuz of the 16th year of Nebuchadnezzar's rule around June-July 609 BCE. This was a desperate attempt by the Assyrian king and his Egyptian allies to retake a foothold on the banks of the Balich, during which he laid siege to the Babylonian garrison stationed in the city. The siege lasted 2 months, until the month of Ululu, August or September 609 BCE, and the Assyrian-Egyptian army retreated when Nebuchadnezzar and his army came to rescue the city, or perhaps even earlier. This is the last time that Assyria is mentioned in the Babylonian Chronicles, and the former empire disappears from the stage of history. After Assyria's disappearance, direct contact was created between Babylon and Egypt, and an era began during which the two empires struggled for control of the entire Fertile Crescent. Before reconstructing the main events of this period and considering the consequences and significance of this struggle, it is important to understand the two powers: the Egyptian Empire during the 26th dynasty and the Babylonian Empire of the Neo-Babylonian period, the age of the Chaldean dynasty.